This is your quick before you buy it for World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King, a pandemic system game. You're watching Call for Two. I'm Jesse. I'm here with Greg.
Thanks for having me on your channel.
Let's quickly go down to the table and see how the game plays.
In World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King, players are attempting to complete 3 quests in order to face the final boss, the Lich King, in a 4th and final quest. Players will lose if the despair track reaches the end, which can happen from having to place a component on the board, such as a ghoul or abomination, and having none to do so, or running out of player cards, or through player death. Players can take a number of actions on their turn, repeating actions as they see fit. You can move. You can fight by rolling dice, attaining hits and blocks, and removing enemies. Abominations are more difficult enemies. You can heal by rolling dice and recovering hit points. You can use free actions by spending your cards, or you can quest by revealing cards and being in the location of the quest and rolling dice to attain successes. At the end of a player's turn, they will reveal cards from the Scourge deck equal to the Scourge track number. Each card revealed, you will replace a ghoul in that location. If you would add more than 3 to that location, you will instead decrease the despair track and add an abomination. After revealing cards, you will move all abominations on the board towards the nearest player. If you end in a location with that player, or are in a location with that player will take a damage equal to the number of abominations in that location. Occasionally, you will draw a Scourge Rises card. That will advance the enemy's agenda. You will reveal a card from the bottom of the deck, add 3 ghouls to the location indicated, and then you will shuffle the discard and place it back on top of the deck. You'll increase the Scourge track, and you'll place an abomination in the location that you revealed. Over the course of the game, players do have their own unique powers, multiple powers on each character. You can use free actions over the course of the game to defend, to prevent damage, free actions to travel, heal, and add bonuses to fighting. There are also strongholds that will be placed on the board throughout the game, which can be used to travel around more easily for the players. After completing a quest, you will reveal a helpful event which players can take into their hand. When you've completed all 3 quests, you will then face the Lich King, who has his own quest to be completed. There's a solo mode in the game as well, and there's opportunities to team up on quests with your fellow teammates. So, theme and components. Well, while Jesse and I are not really interested in World of Warcraft at all, I do think the theme really works in this game. You really do feel like you are fighting monsters and getting involved in the strategy of the game as well as that theme. Now, it is helped along by this amazing components I think this game has, especially for its price point.
Yeah, for the price.
And each of these components has a real function in the game to help you to learn and understand certain concepts, as well as being really neat with this big, this elaborately huge ice castle, the Lich King, who is sort of over these areas, and these miniatures that you could paint, make it look really good, or throw a wash on, or just leave them as is, and they're still really fun to look at. And all the components and art and stuff like that is either serviceable or really well done, I think.
Yeah, I'll keep this pretty short, but I think if you're afraid that this is going to be just like a cut down, simple kiddie version of Pandemic, one message that I would bring is it's not. It is a real, full game inspired by Pandemic, but with some real changes that are interesting. So if you have any interest in game design, or you just like Pandemic and are wondering, should I even bother with this? Yeah, you should bother with this. There are some really interesting new things here.
Yeah, to jump off that, I mean, some of those things to me, like, this is a game of almost like in the pandemic world of attrition to me. Like, there's a lot of little weights and a lot of little dials, and each of those little areas make a very compelling, like, soup of decisions to me. Like, in the game, I might suggest a certain plan. Jesse will counteract with a completely different plan, and then we'll pick different pieces of our plan to make a little Frankenstein thing of how we want to proceed. There's interesting decisions as to whether to go to these quests based on what cards you might have, based on what the monster situation looks like, whether you should be fighting, going towards the quest. But then also there's this really clever system of you can use the cards in your hand continually as a resource to help with your questing, or you can decide when you want to get rid of them in order to make use them for their event value, which is very, very cool. And then you have different player powers, which allows you to be variable and use those to your advantage. I think there's some pretty good theme, a pretty good variety here, because there's different quests. The board, of course, is going to be differently set up, and then you can try these different characters, which also help.
Yeah, quite a lot of replayability here, variability. And it does feel like it's captured all the key important things that we love about Pandemic and those agonizing decisions, but the puzzle is different. They really completely changed the way you sort of win the game, the goals you have to do, and that is an interesting twist. I will say one of the weird disconnects that I had, though, with it is that on one hand, it feels like a lighter game to me than Pandemic. It's a smaller board. The spatial puzzle is less significant. Moving around is easier. You're not building these research stations. It doesn't feel as weighty, as meaty. But on the other hand, the rules are quite a bit more fiddly and complex than regular Pandemic. They're not super complex. Like a couple games, you'll get the hang of it. But it is a little bit of a weird disconnect that it feels lighter and yet the rules are heavier.
To me, I think for the length of game, for the complexity of the game, it offers a lot of great choices, a lot of interesting decisions, an enjoyable game to play, and not too heady or brain burnery, which is great. It's also, to me, there's a game that was out years and years ago called Defenders of the Realm, which I didn't really care for, and this game feels like some new iteration of that kind of bridges Pandemic and Defenders of the Realm and brings us a game that's very enjoyable to play. I think this is going to be easier also. The theme is going to be easier maybe for certain families or for certain people that find a game like normal Pandemic a little too dry, because this really can get people into the game and maybe good for to gateway for people coming in from other hobbies that are adjacent to regular board games.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch as a gateway game because of some of the fiddly rules, but yes, it could fall into that category. And I think you make a great point connecting it to Defenders of the Realm. If you wanted to love Defenders of the Realm, but you're like us and it didn't work for you, too messy, this is a great iteration of that. For me, if I'm trying to think who would really get into this game, I think it really is all about theme. This really captures the feeling of going to battle and trying to come at you. And yet, of all the games that have that feeling, this one is the tightest real strategy game. So the fact that they were able to combine the pure strategy, push your luck but low luck element of Pandemic with this theme and make it feel so compelling, I think that's the audience I see loving this game. The theme.
Yeah. If you've never heard of Pandemic before, don't even care, and you just come out with this fresh, it's a fantastic board game full of interesting choices, exciting gameplay, and fantastic eye-catching components that are fun to play with. If you love Pandemic, then this is, for me, just a great way to approach Pandemic in a different way. I love all the Pandemic games, some I love more than others, but this is just a great new way to play one of my favorite games.
If Pandemic didn't exist, this would be a 10. It would be an amazing game. Everyone should play it. With Pandemic, I think it's lower down on the list of Pandemic spin-offs, but still a great thing worth trying.
Hopefully this would convince you to buy it or not, whether this is right for you. We also have, if you want a little more information, or after you play the game, we have a very long discussion, about an hour-long discussion, where we kind of deep dive into things, and that can be, if that's interesting, you check it out.
And we've also got a playthrough, a two-player playthrough of the two of us playing it.
If you want to get a little more greater sense there. Well, thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.